The old ranch sat at the far edge of a long dirt road, where wind swept gently through wheat fields and the smell of fresh hay carried like a hymn through the valley. The house was modest but sturdy, made of aged timber, its porch sagging slightly under the weight of years. A wide pasture stretched beyond it, dotted with scattered oaks and a weathered red barn that had sheltered dozens of injured animals over time. Everything about the place felt quiet, patient, and slow, like a refuge where time no longer hurried anyone. The ranch belonged to a man named Abel Hartman, known in nearby towns as a gentle giant. He had broad shoulders, a deep laugh, and a habit of speaking only when words mattered. Children trusted him. Widows relied on his kindness, and abandoned animals often found their last home on his land. Abel lived alone after losing his wife many winters ago, but he never lacked company, for his pastures were filled with rescue horses, a few aging cows, and a mule named Samson who brayed louder than a preacher's sermon. On a late autumn morning, a transport truck rolled up the dusty road. The driver stepped out slowly, stretching his stiff back, and wiped his brow with a worn handkerchief. Behind the wooden slats of the trailer, a thin bay horse shifted nervously, his ribs visible beneath a dull, patchy coat. His eyes darted at every sound, as if expecting punishment at any moment. The driver met Abel halfway to the gate and handed him a clipboard. "This one's from a racing stable east of Riverbend," he said apologetically. "Trainer said he's not worth keeping anymore. Gets anxious, spooks easy, won't stay focused on the track. They try to sell him cheap, then try to give him away, but nobody stepped forward. Figure maybe he'd have a chance here, if anywhere." Abel nodded silently, signed the adoption papers, and placed a firm but gentle hand on the horse's halter when the ramp dropped. The horse hesitated, legs trembling from exhaustion rather than defiance. Abel didn't pull or pressure him. He simply stood there, patient as a stone, and let the horse gather his courage. Eventually, the horse stepped down, hooves clicking uncertainly on the wooden ramp. "Traveler," Abel murmured, though he had no papers telling him that was a horse's name. He said it because he sensed a long, painful journey had led the animal here. Traveler flicked his ears at the sound, not quite trusting the unfamiliar deep voice. The driver rubbed the horse's neck sympathetically. Poor thing has never known kindness. Handlers were impatient. They only cared about winning. When he didn't win, they cut feed, raised their voices, and tried harsher tactics. "He's not aggressive, just afraid." His tone softened. Then he looked at Abel with tired resignation. "He needs time, and time is something nobody in racing ever has." With a quiet farewell, the transport truck rattled away, leaving Traveler in a wide-open world he did not understand. He stared at the pasture, at birds circling overhead, at sunlight resting gently on the windows of the barn. Everything felt unfamiliar, too peaceful, and almost suspicious. Abel led Traveler slowly toward a stall, prepared with clean bedding and fresh water. The horse flinched from shadows, from the squeak of hinges, and from the soft brushing of wind through the rafters. Abel spoke in almost a whisper. "Easy, boy. Nobody's asking anything of you." He set a bucket of warm mash inside and stepped back, giving Traveler space. Traveler sniffed cautiously. In the racing stable, food had been hurried and unpredictable. He had learned to eat quickly or risk losing his turn. Here, no one rushed him. He chewed slowly, the warmth comforting his empty belly. For the first 2 days, Traveler avoided touch as if it were a threat. If Abel lifted a rope or reached too suddenly, Traveler retreated to the far corner, trembling. Abel never scolded him. He simply sat quietly outside the stall, repairing an old leather bridle or sipping strong black coffee, humming occasionally. His presence became a steady rhythm, like a heartbeat Traveler could learn to trust. On the 3rd morning, a gentle old mare named Daisy ambled up to the fence where Traveler stood alone. Daisy was blind in one eye and contentedly lazy in the pasture. She lowered her head and rubbed her muzzle along Traveler's neck. He jumped at first, startled by the unexpected affection, but Daisy stayed calm, chewing hay as if offering companionship with the most ordinary gift in the world. Traveler relaxed slightly, reassured by her unhurried confidence. Later that evening, Abel's neighbor Martha arrived carrying a bundle of sweet hay tied with twine. She was silver-haired, soft-spoken, and had known Abel's wife since childhood. She stepped into the barn and paused by Traveler's stall. "Well, now," she whispered with warm surprise, "you're a handsome one beneath all that worry." She set the hay down and kept a respectful distance. Traveler watched her with wide eyes, uncertain yet curious. Martha smiled gently and spoke as though addressing a skittish child. "Nobody here wants a thing from you. Take your time." That night, Traveler lay down on fresh bedding for the first time without expecting someone to yank him up or chase him back into training drills. The moonlight slipped through cracks in the barn walls, illuminating a piece he had never understood before. Abel checked on him twice, once before turning in and once near dawn. Each time, he spoke in a low, reassuring tone. "Sleep easy, Traveler. You're home now." The horse recognized the cadence of kindness, and though he still trembled at unexpected noises, he no longer expected harshness to follow. Days melted into each other, slow and tender. Traveler ate heartier, groomed himself more, and learned the rhythm of Abel's boots on the barn floor. The man talked to him occasionally, but mostly he listened to the silence inside Traveler's wounded spirit and honored it. Though no one said aloud, every soul on that ranch understood one simple truth. Traveler no longer had a future that depended on speed, trophies, or expectations. He had a future built entirely on gentleness, rest, and a chance to rediscover trust one breath at a time. Spring arrived on a ranch with soft rains that washed winter dust in the fields and brought gentle green back into the pastures. Wildflowers decorated the edges of the creek, and the air smelled of new beginnings. Traveler had gained weight. His coat had grown shinier, and his ribs no longer protruded like painful memories. His eyes, once hollow and restless, now held curiosity and a growing confidence. Abel watched him from the porch each morning, sipping coffee while Traveler grazed beside Daisy. The horse no longer hid in the farthest corner of the paddock. He wandered freely, tail swaying with unhurried contentment. Though he still startled at sudden noises, he recovered faster. As spring settled in, Abel began making preparations for a community gathering. Every year, retired ranchers, war veterans, school teachers, elderly townsfolk, and children from a local therapy group visited his land for a day of gentle horse interactions. Some came simply to remember happier years. Others came needing calm and connection. Abel believed horses could speak to parts of the soul that words could not reach. He polished saddles and swept barn aisles. Martha helped bake fresh biscuits and set out pitchers of lemonade. Daisy and Samson were brushed until they shone, and a few calm geldings were ready for children's supervised rides. Traveler watched the activity with quiet confusion. He had no idea what visitors meant, but he sensed an unusual energy in the barn. Abel made no plans for Traveler to participate. He still considered the horse too timid, too easily overwhelmed for the unpredictability of guests. Traveler had made great progress, but Abel refused to put pressure on him. The horse owed no one performance. The gathering day dawned bright and mild. Cars rolled up the dirt road, carrying families, older couples, and small groups from a therapy organization that Abel supported quietly. Some visitors used canes, others wheelchairs. A few older men wore military hats and spoke softly about days long past. Traveler watched from his stall doorway while children laughed near Daisy, learning how to offer carrots with open palms. Abel stood nearby, demonstrating gentle handling. Samson brayed loudly, as if insisting on being noticed, and the children squealed with joy. Traveler's ears flicked nervously at the sounds, but instead of hiding, he remained at the front of the stall, studying everything with cautious interest. His breathing stayed steady, a small but meaningful step. Later in the afternoon, when the barn was full of warm conversation, an elderly man arrived late, guided by his daughter. He moved slowly, leaning heavily on a cane, his hands trembling from age or perhaps long-ago injury. His eyes drifted from horse to horse with aching nostalgia. Dad used to work cavalry horses in service. The daughter explained quietly to Abel. He hasn't been around one in decades. Abel nodded, offering a calm gelding for him to pet. But the old man shuffled past the gelding and stopped in front of Traveler's stall as if drawn by instinct. Abel almost intervened, believing Traveler might spook. But before he could step closer, something remarkable occurred. Traveler lifted his head and exhaled softly. Instead of retreating, he stepped forward, slowly, gently, as though each movement were chosen to reassure rather than surprise. His muzzle touched the man's shoulder and remained there, motionless and comforting. The elderly man froze, then closed his eyes. Tears fell silently down his weathered cheeks. He pressed his trembling hands into Traveler's warm neck, breathing as if remembering parts of himself he thought were gone forever. Traveler did not flinch. He stood like an anchor in a storm, still and sure, letting the man rest against him. Abel stared in disbelief. Daisy, Samson, and every calm horse on the ranch had given tender interactions over the years. But nothing like this silent, precise, comfort Traveler seemed to understand without instruction. The daughter whispered, voice breaking. He hasn't spoken more than a few words in months. I've never seen him so peaceful. The barn grew quiet as visitors paused to witness the moment. Traveler, once a nervous and broken racehorse, offered comfort not from training, but from empathy written into his spirit. Abel stepped closer only when the elderly man was ready to move. "You're welcome to spend as long as you like with him," he said kindly. The man smiled faintly and stroked Traveler's neck again, whispering something too soft for others to hear. After the crowd dispersed, Abel and Martha stood outside the barn, letting late sunlight spill across the pasture. Traveler grazed near the fence, looking ordinary yet undeniably changed. Martha shook her head with gentle wonder. "That horse was made for more than speed, Abel. He's a healer." Abel didn't answer right away. He leaned on the fence, eyes thoughtful. "I've seen calm horses, good ones, but I've never seen one read a man's heart like that." From that afternoon on, Abel allowed Traveler more interaction, not as a therapy animal by profession, but simply as a companion to those who needed quiet presence. When veterans visited for reflective afternoons, Traveler walked up and stood close, breathing slowly until shoulders softened and minds eased. When children with anxiety sat in the grass, Traveler lowered himself nearby as if offering safety. With elderly visitors, he became patient and still, letting them lean or rest against him as long as they wished. Abel stopped thinking of Traveler as broken. The horse was sensitive, yes, but that sensitivity was not weakness. It was a gift. In racing, Traveler's quick reactions and emotional awareness had been a burden. Here, they were his unique strength. Word traveled across nearby towns. "There's a gentle bay horse out at Abel Hartman's place." People whispered, "If you're hurting, he listens better than most folks." Traveler no longer lived with fear. He discovered purpose without being forced to perform. He learned that his worth did not depend on speed or trophies, but on presence, compassion, and quiet connection. For Abel, the lesson arrived slowly but deeply. Every creature carried value, though not always in the way the world demanded. Sometimes it took patience and love to see it. And Traveler, the rejected racehorse with no future, had begun changing more lives than anyone expected. The years drifted by with a softness that suited the ranch. Seasons came and went like chapters in an old diary. Summer brought warm breezes. Autumn filled the barn with the scent of harvest, and winter wrapped the land in stillness. Through it all, Traveler remained the heart of Abel Hartman's sanctuary. Children who once came shy and withdrawn grew into confident young adults. Veterans who struggled with restless nights returned occasionally just to sit by Traveler's stall and breathe easier. Elderly townsfolk visited when loneliness settled heavily on their shoulders, finding peace in brushing his mane or simply listening to his quiet breath. Abel took pride not in fame or money, but in the small transformations he witnessed. He saw strangers leave the ranch lighter, as if carrying less sorrow. He saw young volunteers learn patience from Traveler's gentle steadiness. He saw Martha's eyes brighten each time she sat beside the horse with a basket of biscuits, telling him stories as if he were a trusted old friend. As Traveler aged, his pace slowed, but his spirit never lost its calm strength. His coat remained soft and glossy, his eyes warm and knowing. He walked with deliberate dignity, as if each step were part of a silent promise to remain present for whoever needed him. Abel, too, grew older. His beard turned silver, his shoulders stooped slightly, and his strong hands showed tremors on cold mornings. Working the ranch was harder now, though he rarely admitted it aloud. Traveler sensed every change. The horse began to greet him at the gate without fail, nudging his arm gently when Abel moved slower than before. Abel often leaned against Traveler's neck, finding quiet comfort in the familiar warmth. "You've saved more hearts than any preacher," he murmured. "You're proof that broken things don't stay broken forever." One evening, Abel sat with Martha on the porch, watching Traveler graze in soft twilight. Fireflies glimmered like floating lanterns across the pasture. Martha studied Abel's tired posture and placed a hand on his arm. "You ever worry what happens when you're not here anymore?" she asked softly. Abel stared out the field, where Traveler stood near Daisy's resting spot. "I do," he admitted. He gave so much to others. "I just want to be sure someone protects his peace when I can't." Martha nodded. "We need someone young, someone with vision. Maybe someone who understands what Traveler means to people." The opportunity presented itself sooner than expected. A local school teacher named Helen and her adult daughter, Rosemary, began visiting the ranch to volunteer with therapy days. Rosemary was studying equine-assisted emotional care and had a keen understanding of Traveler's sensitivity. She watched him interact with visitors, fascinated by his intuitive calm. One afternoon, as Traveler rested beneath the old oak tree, Rosemary knelt beside Abel. "I don't know if you've ever considered it," she began carefully, "but this ranch could become a formal sanctuary, a permanent therapy center. People would come from far beyond this valley if they knew what Traveler could offer." Abel listened quietly. "I never built this place to attract crowds. It just became what it needed to be." Rosemary smiled gently. "That's exactly why it works. And when you're ready to rest, I'd be honored to help protect what you started." Abel felt a soft ache in his chest, a mixture of sadness and relief. "I don't need his name in lights," he said. "Just a promise that no one will force him to perform or live differently." "You have my word," Rosemary assured him. "He'll always remain a healer, not a showpiece." Her sincerity eased him more than any grand plan could have. Over the next months, Rosemary and Helen helped organize small workshops, teaching families and therapists how to approach horses gently, how to listen rather than command. The barn was never crowded, never loud. Abel insisted that peace remain the first rule, and Rosemary honored every boundary. Visitors painted Traveler's portrait on the barn wall as a quiet tribute, not for advertisement, but as a reminder of the sanctuary's origin. Above his stall gate, a simple phrase was carved by hand. "Sometimes talent is not for winning, it is for healing." As time passed, Traveler's steps grew slower, his naps longer. His muzzle carried soft flecks of gray, and he preferred lingering near the oak tree with Daisy's memory close by. Abel accepted these changes with deep tenderness. He brushed Traveler carefully each morning, humming old cowboy tunes, grateful for each shared day. Then came a golden summer evening unlike any other. The sky was painted in amber and lavender, and the air held a sweet stillness. Abel sat at Traveler's side inside the pasture, leaning against the fence as if gathering courage. His hands were weaker, his breath shorter, but his eyes remained steady. Traveler walked over and nudged him, insistent but gentle. Abel laughed softly. "You telling me to get up?" Traveler nudged again, and Abel understood. Slowly, with effort, he stood and placed a hand on the horse's mane. "One last ride, huh?" he whispered. He mounted without saddle, trusting Traveler's careful footing. The horse stepped forward with extraordinary gentleness, crossing the pasture as though carrying precious glass. They passed the barn, the creek, the meadow where countless therapy days had unfolded. The world felt familiar and eternal all at once. Traveler carried Abel to the old oak tree, the heart of the pasture, where Daisy rested beneath a stone marked only with a horseshoe. Sunset washed over them like a blessing. Abel slid from Traveler's back and sat with his spine resting against the trunk. Traveler lowered himself to the ground beside him, folding his legs carefully, as if promising companionship until the very end. Abel stroked his neck and whispered, "You weren't meant to run fast. You were meant to help people breathe again." His eyes softened, voice growing thin. "You found your purpose late, same as a lot of us, and you made this ranch a place of grace." Traveler rested his head gently in Abel's lap, breathing slow and steady. Abel closed his eyes, leaning back into the tree as dusk settled. The sanctuary passed into Rosemary's care in the seasons that followed. Traveler lived peacefully under her compassion, loved by generations of visitors who learned his story. And when his own time eventually came, the sanctuary honored him with silence, flowers, and gratitude. Traveler became a legend, not for trophies or speed, but for the kindness he awakened in people. His legacy endured as a reminder to every wandering soul. A rejected heart can become a healer. Every creature deserves patience, dignity, and a second chance. Hello, horse lovers. Before leaving to the video, be sure to subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell so you never miss a future